This is Leisha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast. And I have a confession to make that my next guest for the global audience that's listening, I actually stole from my other job as a judge for the Recruiter Awards. So I have to send my great thanks to Adaptive Media because this next guest was one of the candidates that was up for, I think it was Leader of the Year. Is that right? I think. Possibly.
Yeah,
He's
I
going to
think
tell,
so.
he's going to reveal all. Without further ado, this is the wonderful Tom White, who is, as well as being a fellow podcaster, he runs Tom White Talks and is the CEO of 5Values. Welcome to you today, Tom. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for having me, Lisa. That was a great intro. I feel humbled.
Oh,
Thank you for all the kind words. I appreciate it.
it's true. And honestly, I said to you before we started recording that I feel so privileged that one of my other many hats that I wear is as a judge. I think I've done 6 years as a judge for the Recruiter Awards, which is part of Red Active Media. And when I get to it, great categories to judge. If I speak to a leader like yourself, I'm like, you're coming on my show because there was so much that I took away from that interview without any conflict, without any, revealing anything confidential. And I felt you were so memorable. Can I just ask you, where are you recording from? Because you've got sunshine behind you in that video.
It's a rare day in sunny Bristol. That there's some
Wow.
sun. Yeah, yeah.
To be
It's
fair, it could very well be sunny in Lancashire, but I've been in this recording room since 8 o'clock this morning and it's now 3 p.m. So it could actually be cracking flags for all I know, which is very unlikely in Lancashire. It looks like you're in the metropolis or somewhere like that. So, Tom, I got to know you very well, but our audience are yet to do that. So please, can you give us an overview of your business and also
Mhm.
yourself and explain a little bit about what you do?
Yeah, sure. So again, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's great to be here. So I'm Tom White. I'm the owner and founder of 5Values. 5Values is a recruitment and media business, in short. So there's three distinctive brands underneath the 5Values group. They are 5E Tech, 5E Video, and 5E Media. I've been in recruitment for a long, long time. So I think I started in 2008.
You're a
Predominantly
baby
work.
compared to me.
um, Predominantly work commission only for a lot of that time. So another kind of string to my bow is Tom White Talks, which is my kind of social media handle, and I produce a lot of sales content to help aspiring recruiters basically get better at sales. So it's a little bit about me.
So this Tom White Talks, this is aimed at people who are starting their career journey in recruitment.
So it's really for anyone who wants some help in sales and kind of a mixture of classic sales methodology, but real world advice that I'm still doing day to day in my business. So um, part of my role now as CEO, I'm not kind of a 360 recruiter, but I win big accounts,
Right.
and
Okay.
I help bring that into the group, into the company, both from a recruitment aspect, but also from our marketing and media initiatives. Right, so we actually manage podcasts for some of our customers, for instance, right? So we do more than just find people. But Tom White Talks was set up because, Lisha, frankly, there's so many false prophets and false idols online, right? That have never really done anything of note in sales. So I thought, do you
Yeah.
know what? I'm fed up of this. So I'm going to start producing some sales content. And I hope people will sit up and listen. And so far, so good. So I think it's sort of coming up to 15,000 followers on Instagram. Effectively online, I think there's a lot of false prophets and people that proclaim to be great in sales or to give advice. And the reality is, I don't think they've really ever achieved anything in their careers. And so I know that personally, I've done some really special things. And I didn't realize that until I left my former business to set up 5Values. But I also know as a group, we're doing some great things. And I want to share that information. And actually, I'm willing to give it all away for free on the basis that I know that very little people will actually execute it. But without a brand and without a following these days, you're frankly going to be left behind. So it was one of my New Year's goals in 2024 to actually start creating this content. And I really enjoy it. And it's a great release for me to be able to put that material out online.
And how many followers do you have online then for Tom White Talks?
So Instagram is coming up to 15,000. There's about 30,000 people on LinkedIn. And I'm not sure about the other platforms actually. I think they're fairly embryonic, but Instagram and LinkedIn is certainly growing quite rapidly.
That's incredible. I think that what you're creating there is like a future body of people that will come through that understand what sales is. So you mentioned that the people that are peddling a lot of training aren't really great salespeople, but in terms of attracting people into our industry, how much of what you've seen yourself as a business owner and when you've hired people for yourself, are people actually prepared to still sell? Like when you were selling 16, 17 years ago when you started, how do you think the sales process has shifted?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the reality is everyone should be a salesperson,
Mm,
regardless of the role and job title that you have within an organization.
yeah,
Within our industry of recruitment,
agreed.
everyone should be selling at all times, right?
Mhm.
But I still think amongst a certain, I don't want to say generation, but maybe population, then it's a bit of a dirty word actually to sell, and people sometimes can be reluctant to really actually pick up the phone and start selling or to communicate and sell.
Yeah.
So I think, it's reminding the benefits of doing this. So I have some phrases. So for instance, I'm big on emails being for confirmation and phones for negotiation. I teach
Love
my
that.
yeah, I teach my staff that, and it's served them really well, and I hope it serves other people really well. But I think the shifting landscape these days is that uh, I think there's a general reluctance sometimes to actually just grab the bull by the horns and go for it, and I think that's what's going to separate people, because if people are worried about doing that, it's quite easy to differentiate yourself when your competition don't want to sell.
I agree with you. I mean, look, I don't know whether you've got young people in your life, i.e., you're a parent, but I've got two Gen Zs, and I've talked to them about this endlessly because I'm like, I've always taught them, just pick up the phone if you need me, and obviously I'll pick up the phone after a podcast. Then I'll have about 20 missed calls. But joking aside, we have got a new era of social selling where most people are so used to buying something on TikTok. They don't get a cold call from somebody saying, come and buy this new makeup or these new trainers. It's all social selling. So I think, from a landscape point of view, there's a reluctance for them to do anything by picking up the phone. They don't book a restaurant on the phone. They do it all through Open Table or whatever. And so I think that the whole narrative for the new generation coming through is that that's their norm. So to me, when I interview somebody who is of that generation and they literally are picking up the phone to me to say, I'd like to get a new job in recruitment, or I'd like to have an introduction into recruitment, straight away they've elevated themselves literally by picking up the phone. And so I think, that as a starting point is where, maybe we have got a slightly different landscape, which is interesting, isn't it? Because you as a business, you with your innovation in terms of technology and AI, and I know you talk prolifically around, and I hope we are going to have time to come and talk about this. We're almost like at this split society where we still want to have our recruiters on the phone selling, but we're in a world that's surrounded by a way that you don't need to.
Mm, mm.
Challenging time.
I think so. I think, if you look at, say, tech recruitment, which is the industry that I'm in,
Yep.
we preach a lot about picking up the phone and making things happen. However, I've also seen people doing deals with people through WhatsApp or through Teams where the managers in which they're dealing with, they also don't want to pick up the phone, and the consultants don't want to pick up the phone. So you end up this kind of quasi odd situation of just messages. And I
Right.
don't think it's a great world to be in, because you can't build rapport as well as you can do through having phone calls. You can't get a sense of urgency of how that person's feeling, so on and so forth. So I think it's a bit of a sorry world that we're in.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm not sure long term it's going to be as easy as it might be today, certainly in the UK and Europe, just to pick up phone calls, right? I know in the UAE that it's actually illegal to cold call and you can get fined for it. In the US, it's very easy just to put spam callers down. So I think there's a window of opportunity and an inflection point between technology and messaging
Yeah.
whereby we can still use calls and cold calls to affect change. And that window of opportunity is now. And it's a great time because in 5 years' time, it might be very difficult to do some of the things that we're probably talking about right now.
Yeah, oh, I agree. I think it changes that quickly. I think it's interesting, and I think it's important to identify when I talk about people picking up the phone, I don't necessarily mean the cold call anymore. I don't mean in the world where I started in the 90s, it was, please now speak to the person responsible for recruitment. We're long beyond those days now. To me, this is where you're going to call somebody either through an introduction, through a recommendation, you've done some, fact finding, there's been a lead passed to you. It could be that we're literally talking about you. I love that phrase that you've just said. Email is confirmation, phone is negotiation. I cannot understand anybody, and I know this happens because we do ask for feedback on maybe more sort of friends that have gone through recruiters that go through a whole process never having actually spoken to somebody on the phone. I just find it absolutely ludicrous. Like, I would not move jobs unless I'd gone in and physically met people, spoken to people on the phone that maybe aren't based in the office. For me, I think there's so many nuances that you get when you actually have a conversation. But from a sales perspective, you're picking up on buying signals. You're listening for, it's active listening for reservations. You can ask those questions, whereas on a message, you can get avoided really quickly, really easily.
Yeah, you know what? I think there's a bigger picture topic here around AI and the takeover of AI. So I think at the moment, moving job or buying a house, people want to talk to the agent.
Yeah.
And people want their opinion and they want to ask that question because they don't trust AI to get it 100% right. However, I think that will flip in the future, and I think people won't trust the human and they'll trust the AI more with their advice. And I can see that happening in the future because, of course, that agent is incentivized through commission bonus, etc., to make it happen. But those days of the broker, the agent, of listening to that person, I don't know if they're numbered, but they're certainly on the decline. And it's a sorry kind of state of affairs, but I do see the younger generation. So because if we look at the generation today, right, as you said, they'll speak to a candidate, etc., but they'll never actually talk to them, speak to them through messaging in order to place them. Well, that's only going to continue. So that candidate may therefore speak to AI in the future and actually won't trust a human to do it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And it's going to get worse, right? In that sense of touch and interpersonal relations and so on and so forth. So I don't think we can stop it. I just think there just needs to be a sense of logic to the whole process and at what point people get involved.
I think out of all the conversations I've ever had in 5 seasons around this topic, which obviously even in the 5 seasons has gone fast forward, I think we're only talking about this at the start of 2023, maybe. I totally agree with what you just said there. And I think for me, the reason I'm not particularly concerned per se about my role and how I operate in my business and the people that I partner with is that human element. It's that expertise of why somebody comes to trust you and isn't just going to flip the transaction. It's a transaction. That's all it is. And that will get replaced. Those are the people. I think it's already happening. I think that's why we've seen such a huge exodus from the industry over the last 12 months, even 18 months. We're talking, I think it was actually, we've already mentioned the Recruiter magazine. I think it was their data that something like a third of recruiters have left the profession over the last 12 months, whether that was through choice or not. And I think that's probably, and people got the amount of messages I got that the people are like, is this true? And I'm like, probably, based on the people I've interviewed and then not represented. Yeah. And I think that's a lot. And a lot of people said, why? And I said, a large part of it isn't just going to be cost of living and, the impact of that on businesses, but it was the impact of AI and outsourcing. So I think you're absolutely right. And I think we are at a really pivotal moment. And you're obviously, the reason that you were so memorable to me and that I wanted you on is that you kind of not straddle both worlds. That sounds wrong, but you're a really great example of how we can revolutionize ourselves. And that's why I want our audience to benefit from your expertise. So from I guess, forecasting into the future, however far we can see, what should we be doing now as leaders to protect our businesses and ensure our recruiters are doing apart from just picking up the phone? And I also just want to kind of go a little bit more futuristic in terms of I've seen quite a lot of data around future jobs. Like if you're a recruiter right now recruiting for, admin assistants and things that probably will get replaced, what sort of industries should we be looking at?
Yeah. So, well, firstly, again, thank you for the kind words. It's very flattering. I think to the two aspects there. So to the World Economic Forum, I'm a member of the World Economic Forum. And I contribute on AI and IoT topics. That's another kind of string to my bow. Jack of all trades, master of none, Lisha, as we said backstage. But they've just released their future jobs report for 2025, and it's actually quite an interesting read. Right, it's doing the rounds on LinkedIn at the
It
moment.
is.
But I think ultimately it's about embracing the technology that we have. So when a computer came out, typewriters were worried that it would take their job, but it didn't. It just actually made them perform a bit more, or it eased into increased productivity. Now, the same could be said for AI. So I think the number one thing that leaders in the industry can do is embrace AI. There was grants out there, AI upskilling grants in the UK where you could get paid to go and learn, etc. There's lots of things that people can do. And there's lots of built-in tools that, recruitment companies probably have already that they don't even know are there, right? I mean, how many people are using Copilot on Microsoft to the best of their abilities? Probably very few. So I think embrace AI, see it as a tool to increase productivity and not to replace you, and get the most out of it. What's going to happen in 5 years? I'm not entirely certain, right? I think Sam Altman went on record a few months ago saying in 10 years' time, the things that they're working on at OpenAI labs at the moment is going to blow people's minds, right? But I think we can only do the here and now. And I
Yeah.
think embracing it because the train's not stopping and you've got to get on it.
Otherwise, you get left behind.
Indeed.
That's a scary thought, really, isn't it? So in terms of the recruitment process, then, if we think about our listener who, split between leaders and recruiters, what element of AI should we be using within our processes, and what element should we be using our intuition as human beings? Like if we think about a typical recruitment process.
Yeah. So I think anything that's a task which is data heavy or repetitive should be done via AI.
Yeah.
Anything that requires a personal touch, and when I say require, I think it benefits from a personal touch, should be done, by that individual. So what does that look like in real terms? Well, if you're leaving notes on a system, that should be AI. It should be automatically saving notes off the back of calls. And there's lots of tools out there at the moment that people are using. I think MetaView is one of them for candidate qualification, but there's note takers and various things that can input that data directly onto the CRM. But the things that require the human touch are the things that would benefit, as I mentioned. So opinions, sharing opinions, facts. AI can't tell you that the company has a bad cafeteria, right? Or you want to try and park in a certain place at a certain time because of
Very true.
issues and so on and so forth,
Right.
right? So it's all of those nuanced small details that people will get benefit from.
Yeah, I agree with you totally, and I think I love the fact that you allude to that you'll know where the free parking is. Now, I think it's really fair, and actually that was what prompted me to ask you that question because I think that there's amazing tools out there, and I'm saying that as somebody that's been in recruitment for a really long time. We use Otter. Which is a great tool for those because we do a lot of telephone calls, we do a lot of face-to-face meetings, and I think that we're almost at a point of like there's so much choice. Leaders often ask me, and I'll be sat in a meeting with somebody, and they'll go, "Well, we've no idea what to use. There's just so much choice out there. And what do we subscribe to? Which one do we use?" So I think it's almost like overwhelming to a lot of people that they know they need to get on that train, to use your expression. And I've just said, just go and try stuff. There's so many free trials out there. Go and try it. See what it is you're trying to automate. What is it that you want to removed from the human being that can then go and do the client meetings and do the interviews and conduct the onboarding, whatever, the human side of what we do, and just leave the rest of it to the AI. So I do think we're at a point where, if I think back even a year ago, I wasn't having conversations at that level. You had either your early adopters or those that were just like, we're not going to use AI.
Mm, mm.
You're already using it, you just don't realize it, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
That is the truth, isn't it? So in terms of your video expertise, the link to, as we record this now, the function is still on LinkedIn. Do you tend to share video on LinkedIn? Because I personally just scroll past it because I have enough reels on my other social media. What are your views on it?
So I think there's a time and a place for content depending on the social media that you're looking at, right? So LinkedIn for me primarily is a networking tool and a business development tool.
Yeah.
And it's tailored around my expertise in AI, IoT, and video technology, the actual technology behind video streaming, right? So those are
Okay.
three areas I'm quite well versed in. So
Mm.
any content that I put out there is specifically tailored around those three subject matters. Yeah. If I'm putting out sales content, that primarily that's a short form content that's on Instagram and that's on TikTok, because that's what the audience and the demographic
Yeah.
tends to look at and what they want. But the best place to receive that as well. I think LinkedIn, LinkedIn's in a funny old place, right? I think it doesn't really know what it is anymore.
I agree.
I think ever since the Microsoft acquisition and, the kind of increased level of posts which are not kind of job related or career related, it's a strange world, and everyone is overly friendly and supportive on LinkedIn, and it seems a very strange dynamic compared to other social media sites. So be interesting to see what happens with that long term. But I think, yeah, that's my views on it anyway. I'm not sure if they're entirely correct or accurate, but they are my views.
Every recruiter that relies 100% on LinkedIn just did a little wobble because they're thinking what is happening with it. But it's significantly changed. I started using it probably back in 2000, probably when you started recruiting, probably about 2008. I don't think everyone even really knew what it was, but I think a tech recruiter invited me on and I was like, oh, what's this? It was around the same time Facebook had gone on Facebook, and I was like, well, this looks interesting. And I think you're right. I think that, around that time of the acquisition, I think it has changed and transformed. I, for one, I'm a huge fan of personal content on there, but maybe I'm just the rarity. I find it really interesting to when people share their personal stories on LinkedIn behind their professional career, if that makes sense. But I think I actually agree with you. I nodded away because I think it has lost its way a little bit. I'm not sure it knows where it wants to be. I don't think it's going anywhere, but I don't think you should rely 100% on LinkedIn for your social media. I think if that's a really important part of your strategy, I've been saying that for years to people. Think about, you've got to have a holistic approach to attracting your clients and your candidates. It can't just 100% be LinkedIn. I think people think I sit on there all day, every day. I probably spend about an hour a day on there.
I think it's what works for you as well, right?
It is.
So, whatever works for you, how you position it, what your persona is, how you put out content, tone of voice, etc. That whole branding piece. If it works for you, great, right? But if it isn't, then you need to change it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. So given that you're the king of innovation, and that was one of the things that we commended you for, I think, as judges, what is the future looking like for your business, for 5Values? What can we expect to see coming out of Tom White Talks this year?
I think, do you know what? It's so funny. So I think having just heard that, I think maybe a year of consolidation is probably really worthwhile for us. So, last 18 months have been quite tricky in the tech kind of recruitment, staffing, resourcing space for a lot of brands.
Yeah.
And we felt that to a certain degree as well. So I think we really kind of need to look at where our customers are. We have a lot of customers. We have, more than 200 different clients that have signed terms with us, which is for the size of our business is really strong. But we need to land and expand more within those businesses, and we need to double down and make sure that we're doing the right things by those customers and growing in those certain areas. Because I think that sometimes is lost in the quest for new business all the time.
Absolutely agree.
That's not to say, we'd ever not look at new business. I think that's a cardinal sin, but you should balance it depending on your needs as much as possible. I think with regards to Tom White Talk, so there's a lot more content coming, studio-based content, raw content, interviews, kind of reaction videos, newsletters, subscription services, channels, etc. I really want to give a big push on it, right? Because I think it's really important, and I'm really passionate about it.
I can see
And so
that.
far, so
It's
good.
alive when you talk about it. It's lovely to see.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Everyone's got to do something that they love, right? Because at the end of the day, we've all got to get up in the morning and we've got to go to work. And that phrase, do something that you love, and then you'll never work a day in your life. I mean, it's so important, and I think overlooked as well. And you can find that, the recruiters out there, if there's any listening, you can find areas that you can recruit in things that you love
Yeah.
and things that you do, and it does become easier.
That's
And if
what
you
gets
and
you.
you,
That's what gets you through a bad day. That's what gets you through.
mm,
Yeah, that's what, I think. Thank you for being so candid, because I think that a lot of leaders will think, phew, it's not just me that's consolidating this year. A lot spent the back end of last year doing the same thing, and probably will spend the foreseeable future doing the same thing, because we've traded through a really challenging time, and it ain't over. I think anyone that went into Christmas 2024 going, well, 2025 is going to be a great year, it's like, I think it's just going to be more of the same, actually. I think this is it. I think it's just going to be evolving. There's going to be so many things evolving, like AI around us, the economic climate. There's lots of changes that are beyond our control. So I think, I agree with everything that you've said there. And I think I do believe that what you put out, you get back in. And that, whether that's, you're doing it for financial reasons, or you're doing it just from it sounds like you enjoy doing the Tom White talks because you're genuinely passionate about bringing the right people through, and that sales is something that comes naturally to you. And I really, really admire that.
thank you. No, I appreciate that. Yeah, yeah. I don't know if it's natural or not. It's just, yeah, it's just one of those things, right? I think you just I think when you enjoy it, you tend to be pretty good at it.
And it's
And
really obvious and it's really natural. That's what I always say. This is why I enjoy my podcast days, because even though I've got a million other things that I should be doing and could be doing, this is why I do what I do, because I love spending a day, and then I can then share this to our community. It's out there, evergreen. And obviously, I do believe it attracts people, it acquires new clients and candidates. But actually, I just love speaking to people about what they're passionate about. So I'm very grateful to you, because I know how busy you are. I'm going to let you get back to your beautiful, balmy Bristol sunshine. And I'm going to
thank
go
you,
see
Lisa.
whether I left the snow behind in Ramsbottom this morning. Thank you so much for making time to talk to us on the Recruiters Recruitment podcast.
You're very welcome. Thank you.